We've got about a minute or two after 1:10, so I think it's time to start the show. My name is Brandon Peliquin. I'm the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service out of Wilmington, Ohio, so the local office that serves this area. Al Randall is up there. He's one of our lead forecasters at the National Weather Service in Wilmington. And we're going to spend some time talking to you about how amateur radio helps us at the Weather Service. In particular, how amateur radio folks help us essentially to save lives through the issuance of warnings such as severe thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings and flash flood warnings. And we got off to an interesting start this morning, obviously. If you were able to sleep last night, you were probably woken up by a lot of thunder and lightning, and we had some flash flooding and flooding too. Fortunately, as far as I know, we didn't have any tornadoes. But this time of the year around this neck of the woods, we can certainly have tornadoes and just about any type of severe weather as well. So on the next slide, it's been a challenging couple of years, I think, for everybody. Yeah, hit the down arrow. And pre-COVID, this is what it looked like at the amateur radio station at our office, at least when we activated the Skywarn network. We'd have at least one person there, sitting in a chair, watching the radar and monitoring the communications, tuned in to all of the nets within our 52 county area that we serve. But on the next slide, this is the Skywarn Desk the last couple of years. It's pretty empty and it's pretty lonely, so we put a fan there just to kind of keep the station company. If you hit the next slide, Al. Over there on the left-hand side, that didn't receive a lot of use the last couple of years. But fortunately, we've been able to continue the mission, right? We all adapted, we all became flexible, and we brought out the old-fashioned phone. We went old school, and reports were relayed to us through the phone. There's also a program called Nws Chat that some of you may be aware of. Our partners, including emergency managers, amateur radio folks, the TV meteorologists, they're allowed to get in there, and it's a good situation awareness tool, and it's a good tool to share information. So our amateur radio networks were able to go in Nws Chat and give us those reports of large hail or funnel clouds or flooding or whatever it is, so we could have that information to either issue warnings or put more information in the warnings that we already have in effect, because I think we all probably agree, if we have warnings out that say radar has indicated this may happen, well, that's good, but it's more effective if we say trained spotters have detected funnel clouds, flash floods, or whatever it is. People are more likely to act if we say it's actually been observed, it's been reported, as opposed to this Doppler Radar suggested that a tornado may be moving through your area. So despite COVID and not being able to have the hams in our office the last couple of years, we've been able to continue Skywarn and continue activations, so we have the information that we need during these active weather events. It also dawned on me when I was putting this presentation together a couple of weeks ago that this is the first time we've been able to be at Hamvention since the big Memorial Day tornado outbreak in 2019. If you remember, Hamvention was just a week or two before in 2019, and I was up here, I think I was standing right here in my blue NOAA shirt, and we were talking about safety and preparedness, and little did I know that less than a couple of weeks later, there was going to be this huge tornado outbreak across the Wilmington area. So I've got a few slides, and we're just going to talk a little bit about this Memorial Day tornado outbreak. In Wilmington's area, we have 52 counties we're responsible for in central and southwest Ohio, southeast Indiana, and northern Kentucky. There were 19 tornadoes, confirmed tornadoes, that affected our area in only a span of a few hours. And there were actually 21 that affected the state of Ohio. A couple happened just east of our area into portions of southeast Ohio. There was one EF4, that was the Dayton Trotwood tornado, which I have some pictures about here shortly. There were 3 EF3s, 3 EF2s, and then 12 EF1s and EF0s. And so at the bottom there, I added this statement: amateur radio operations absolutely helped to save lives that night. I mean, consider a tornado moving through, an EF4 tornado moving through a highly populated area after dark. That evening, I was not in the office that evening, but that evening when I saw what was going on, I really expected horrible news that scores of people in the Dayton area would have been killed. There were no direct fatalities. There was one indirect fatality where the tornado was probably a contributing factor. We also had a fatality up in Mercer County with another tornado, one of the threes. But aside from that, there were no fatalities, which absolutely amazed me. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think, the technology that exists now, people were aware that tornado warnings were issued. Our office issued tornado warnings with a lot of advance notice in this sort of case. Al Randall was actually there. He was one of the lead forecasters on duty that evening before the event and during the event as well. So I think our office was on task, had warnings out, and people were receiving warnings on their cell phones. Their cell phones were going off, and they could act appropriately. NOAA weather radios were going off, and they could act appropriately. So I think, it's just amazing, and amateur radio was absolutely a part of that. And with that EF4 tornado that happened, we had issued a tornado warning, a base tornado warning, and then as we saw signs of a strong tornado developing, we have these tags. We can kind of give different levels of a tornado warning. We have a base, we have a considerable, and then a catastrophic. And a catastrophic would correlate with a tornado emergency. And as we kind of ramped up to considerable, I mean, this storm on radar was looking really nasty. It had some signatures that would make us really concerned, not just about a tornado occurring, but a strong tornado occurring. We were in constant communication with our amateur radio networks, and a report from Dayton Skywarn really helped give us the confidence to ramp up that tornado warning to a tornado emergency. We've only done a couple of tornado emergencies. In all the years we've been able to declare tornado emergencies from a tornado warning. This was the second one, and Dayton Skywarn and our networks gave us that information to increase our confidence to declare that emergency. And we hope that everybody acts and responds when we issue a tornado warning, right? I hope that people are doing that. But if there's a small group of people, it's another tornado warning. A tornado never hits my house. When we say tornado emergency, okay, there's a confirmed tornado occurring and it's likely to be a strong tornado. And I think that extra wording in there, tornado emergency, significant threat to life and property, that type of strong wording really helped to get people's attention where people could take cover and be safe from what would eventually be an EF4 tornado. So here's just another map here. We had a few forecasters who kind of looked at this, and one of the forecasters, Andy Hatzos, he did some research and actually produced a poster that was shown at the National Weather Association meeting a couple of years ago. And this shows you the 21 tornadoes that affected Ohio. We have the 19 in Wilmington's area, and then a couple there in the lower right portion of the map that also occurred in southeast Ohio. And each either red dot or red line shows you a path of a separate confirmed tornado. And there near Dayton and Montgomery County, we certainly had that 20-mile EF4. Amateur radio helped us out with that too. And originally, we had called it an EF3 that was 19 miles, okay? Further information, which I'll go into a little bit, helped us bump it up to an EF4. And then the Dayton Skywarn and the Red Cross as well gave us more damage information at the end of the 19 miles, and that helped us to stretch that track out to a 20-mile tornado. So again, even after the event, amateur radio partners were helping us along the way, because we had a lot of work to do even after the tornadoes were all done with. So in the top part, a couple of radar images of that Dayton Trotwood tornado. Now, if you've ever taken spotter training class, you probably know a little bit about radar. The lowest tilt or level of reflectivity is shown there on the left. And that's a supercell thunderstorm. And it was rotating like the dickens. And actually, kind of at the end of that swirl, that's a debris ball. That's what we were seeing on the radar. It's all the stuff, parts of houses and cars and who knows what else being thrown around. And the radar is actually detecting that debris associated with the tornado. We were seeing that live at our office when we were looking at the radar. And then on the right-hand side there, that's velocity. And velocity helps to show us wind inside storms, and we can see rotation inside storms. And you've probably heard before, when the green and the red are close together, that's a sign of rotation. And we certainly had very strong rotation there on that velocity image on the right-hand side there. And I don't know if you can see it very well. The day after, we had a lot of survey work to do. Andy was up there in a helicopter getting a bird's eye view of the damage. This is one of those shots there. All those homes have some degree of damage. On the next slide, Al. We were also to be on the ground and take some pictures as well. So just some more shots there. The tornado, when it was at its strongest, was kind of going along, I think it's called Stillwater River. And it was just amazing how all the trees had damage along that path there. As you can see to some degree down on the bottom left portion of the pictures there. In the bottom right there, I was there. Al and I actually went out a couple of days later on the ground when we could actually get to places on the ground instead of just in the air. And we saw some of these trees, they were debarked. Never really seen that before up close. Excuse me, and personal. Just the winds were that strong, it just took the wood right off the tree there. It was just amazing. Next slide. So here we are, Stillwater River, and all those trees have damage. And that factored into the assessment, okay? We make assessments on the enhanced Fujita scale, the EF scale. How strong is the tornado, EF 0 to EF 5? Originally, with the aerial footage, we called this an EF 3. And it was an EF 3 across a good chunk of the path of the tornado. But there was an area right around here where it seemed like maybe the winds were just a little bit stronger. And certainly all the trees down along the river there was a sign. It wasn't just a few trees or scattered damage, it was pretty much all the trees, being snapped or uprooted or totally taken down. And here's another image there again, pretty much every tree, this is a couple of days after the event there, were pretty much damaged. Next slide. That's the debarking I'm talking about. See how it's just completely missing across a portion of the tree, the bark there. And look in the bottom right, you see that pinkish color? That's insulation and other debris that was wrapped around parts of the tree. That debris actually came from an apartment complex nearby. And we had debris thrown pretty far. Quarter mile, half mile in some cases. And so here's the apartment complex that Al and I visited. It's a 3-story. The top story is completely destroyed. The roof is lifted off, all these apartment buildings. The external walls have completely collapsed there. But even on the second story, we see appreciable damage, not just on the siding, but even within. Look there on the corner there. That's pretty much destruction of the second story as well. Next slide. And there's a close-up view. Even the bottom level, that's pretty significant damage. So when we do these damage surveys to determine what rating tornadoes get on the EF scale, we look at damage, okay? We look at damage, and that helps us estimate the winds. And we have all these damage indicators, okay? Looking at hardwood trees and softwood trees and strip malls and 2-story homes and apartment buildings, like in this case here. This is an apartment building. It's a 3-story apartment building. And we have that as a damage indicator, and there are degrees of damage that help us estimate the winds that cause that damage, okay? The initial assessment was about 160 miles an hour, which would be an EF3 tornado. But when we looked at that, and we got up to degree of damage, 4 is uplift or collapse of roof structure, leaving most walls standing. Well, we're above that. 5, most top story walls collapsed. That's pretty much the case. So we went up to number 6, almost total destruction of top 2 stories. All right, well, we don't have total destruction of all the 2 stories, right? The first story, and in some cases, the second story. So EXP is expected, LB is lower bound, UB is upper bound. So basically, the lower bound is about 140 miles an hour, the upper bound is 180 miles an hour. So the wind of that tornado at that site right there is somewhere between 140 and 180. And originally we had 160, but when we considered all 3 stories there and the trees, we bumped the 160 up to 170. Next slide. And if you look here on the chart, if you can see it, 170 miles an hour actually correlates with an EF4 tornado instead of an EF3 tornado. So that's just a little glimpse of how we made the assessment there for that long tornado. As you can imagine, there's no way we could have looked at every piece of damage along the stretch of 19 and then 20 miles. The aerial footage was very useful to us, and then we saw what we could see on the ground, and we went to the most heavily damaged areas. If we could safely get to those heavily damaged areas, some of the places we couldn't even get to when we were out there. But we saw what we could, and as I said, we bumped it up to 170 miles an hour, which put us into the EF4 threshold. And there's a website down there. We have an event summary there with some more pictures and maps and information if you're curious to learn more about this Memorial Day tornado event. All right, stepping back a little way, and we'll have a Q&A period at the end if you want to ask questions or talk about that Memorial Day tornado event. But I do want to step back and give you a little bit of background about the National Weather Service. There's our mission right there. Essentially, it's protection of life and property. Just about everything we do, issuing watches, issuing warnings, putting out forecasts, being here today in this forum and having a booth out there, don't forget to visit us. It's about preparedness. It's about safety for the protection of life and property. And so the Weather Service is a federal agency. We're part of NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is a part of DOC, or the Department of Commerce. And that just really, I think we got a couple of fly-ins here, but highlighting protection of life and property and where we fall underneath the DOC, or Department of Commerce. There are 122 weather forecast offices, or as we say, WFOs. Al and I are from one WFO. We're from WFO Wilmington, Ohio, which serves this area. But if you click again, Al, there's 121 other offices out there. Click one more time, it'll circle our office right there in Southwest Ohio. But there's all these other offices across the contiguous US as well. And we're all doing the same thing. We're all issuing watches and warnings when hazardous weather is expected. We're putting out 7-day forecasts. We're conducting spotter training for people in our local area. That's the difference. We're just doing the same things in different geographical areas. We do this stuff in Southwest Ohio, Southeast Indiana, Northern Kentucky. Other offices will do that in Sterling, Virginia, or Miami, Florida. Here's a zoomed in shot of our county warning area, our area of responsibility there. The Ohio counties in the yellow-orange color. The pinkish-red color is our 8 counties in Southeast Indiana, and then we have 12 counties in Northern Kentucky in the blue color as well. And that's what it looks like, kind of a bird's eye view or an aerial view of our office. And this office has been here for, gosh, better than 25 years. We were established in the mid-90s. That's when the Weather Service went under this modernization project. You had a whole lot of smaller Weather Service offices, and many of them combined into full-fledged WFOs, or weather forecast offices. And our WFO kind of took the responsibility of Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton. And this was a process. It took quite a few years kind of to ramp down the Dayton, Columbus, and Cincinnati WSOs and to really spin up the Wilmington WFO. But by 96, we were pretty much ready to go to take on all the responsibility for those 3 major metro areas. We've got about 25 people on our staff. We're actually one of the weather forecast offices which is co-located with a river forecast center too. There's 13 river forecast centers. The Ohio River Forecast Center is one of them, and they're in the same building as the Wilmington Weather Forecast Office. So there's actually probably closer to 45 people who work in that building, but about 25 people are the weather forecast staff. And you know, most of us are working around the clock. The forecasters work rotating shifts, which is not the most pleasant thing to have to do, but the weather never stops, so we can't stop either. So we've got day shifts and evening shifts, and yes, we've got midnight shifts too, and we have to work Christmas Day and Thanksgiving and all the holidays as well. But again, it's about keeping people safe and aware and protected when hazardous weather strikes. And there's been quite a few hazardous weather events over the years on around holidays as well, and I swear we get way too much more of our fair share of active weather at night. You know, what happened to the good old days when we had severe weather between 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Now I think severe weather likes to wait until 7 p.m. and go throughout the entire night, which is bad for everybody for many, many reasons. So here's our operations area on a routine weather day. 2 or 3 people typically out in operations doing the routine duties, the routine forecast duties. We do aviation forecasts called TAFs, terminal aerodrome forecasts. If you click there, close in view, and I think we're gonna fly in some desks here, Al. We're gonna, if you click it a couple of times, there's the aviation desk there, sometimes also the short-term forecast desk. You know, that can be separate or can be baked in with the long-term forecast desk as well. And, you know, we always want to have someone answering the phone when you might be calling us with a severe weather report. And, you know, we launch a balloon a couple of times a day too. Somebody's got to do that. And we always have a person responsible for that. And usually that's the public service person. But during severe weather, our office, just like any other office in the weather service, has to ramp up the staffing. 2 to 4 people can easily become 6 to 10 people or even more in a big outbreak type of situation. So we're going to fly a lot of duties on in there. You know, we got the routine duties. If you click on that there, we still have aviation forecasts and routine forecasts to do. And the phones ring in and reports are coming in and we're doing briefings and interviews, but the radar's active. We need radar operators to watch these storms and issue severe thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings, but maybe hydrology is a factor there, where we might have to have flash flood warnings and flood advisories. So we might have a person just totally dedicated to the hydrology aspect of things. So it gets really busy, it gets really active, and usually we have a storm coordinator person too, just to maintain that controlled chaos that can happen in an active weather event. The Weather Service loves its acronyms. I'm going to try to keep the acronyms to a minimum here, but this is one I kept in. I've put this in a presentation before, in this presentation before actually. That's our computer platform. It's called Awips, the Advanced Weather Interactive Processing System. It's mobile screens that we can just mouse across and do almost everything that we need to do. We can look at radar data, satellite data, create forecasts, issue warnings and watches, and things of that nature on this platform here. And you can better believe that observations matter in a big way. Okay, we can't make a forecast unless we know what's actually happening in the world of weather. So real live weather data and observations are really important. We throw balloons up twice a day. Right now it's 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. I believe that we would put a balloon up. That balloon data, I've got a few more slides on it. That balloon data is really useful for us. We're trying to figure out if there might be a risk of severe weather that day. And that data gets ingested in these supercomputers anyway that helps us to forecast the weather days or even some cases weeks out. And we look at radar data and satellite data as well. So here's the upper air information there. Click on that again. As I said, used by the computer models to help us forecast the weather, but we could actually look at the raw data to see how much energy may be in the atmosphere or how much wind shear may be in the atmosphere, which helps us determine how bad it's going to be on an afternoon if we're expecting the chance for severe weather. So our office launches these, and a lot, not all, but a lot of the other weather forecast offices across the country will launch these as well. And these things go up, I mean, well above where the airplanes fly, you know? So we're seeing the data up there at 30,000 feet, but we're seeing data even well above 30,000 feet too. They can be up there for a couple of hours before eventually they burst, and what goes up must come down, so eventually the balloon and that little radio sonde up there will come down. The radio sonde is essentially the little package of sensors that gets that data back into our computer so we can see what the temperature is as we go up in height, the pressure and height, the wind and height, and all that sort of stuff. And there's a look inside our Doppler radar. It's like a big satellite dish. If you've ever driven by the Wilmington Weather Forecast Office, you've probably seen the tall tower. Look for the soccer ball on top, and inside that soccer ball-shaped dome is the radar itself, or the radar dish itself, and it's always spinning, right? And it sends us back energy, and this is kind of how it works. It's spinning, it sends out a pulse of energy out in the atmosphere, and raindrops, hailstones, snowflakes, that energy is reflected back to the radar. And so we can kind of get a sense of where there's precipitation, where there's storms, and more power reflected back to us usually means heavier precipitation or stronger storms are occurring. And we can see how storms move too to gauge what winds they're producing or if they're rotating. So here's an example here. This goes back a little while of a storm. I want to say it might be in Butler County in southwest Ohio. And that's another supercell storm. Supercell storms tend to rotate. They have mesocyclones, and we see a hook echo in the reflectivity up there. That little notch kind of rotating around the storm, right? That's a hook echo there. And we can even make cross sections in 3D views to see how tall the storm is, or to see exactly where the rotation in that storm may be. And this all helps us to put out warnings and make forecasts. Putting the pieces together, we're looking at a lot of data. The radar is important. We couldn't do what we do without radar. You know, technology is great, but it has its limitations. And one thing I always like to point out at spotter training classes is the radar can't see what's happening at the ground, right? Because of the curvature of the Earth, that radar beam shoots out from the radar. So the radar really never samples what's actually happening at the ground, which is a big limitation because that's where you and I live and breathe and do what we do. Now, it can help us to estimate what may be happening at the ground, but ground truth is so, so important. So in addition to looking at radar data and other data from technology, we want to hear from our spotters, amateur radio partners, and others letting us know what's happening at the ground level. That helps us put out the warnings. And once, in our brains, we have all that information out and make the decision, the human decision, not the computer decision, the human decision to issue a warning. On the Awips screen there, we draw a polygon. It's a box around the cell that we think is going to produce severe weather, is likely to produce severe weather. We put the box around where the highest confidence is, and having damaging wind gusts or quarter-size hail or whatever we're expecting, track it, a formatter runs, and we can get the text just like that. We're not typing the text. Pretty much what we do, we're interacting with this display here, drawing the polygon, and then an interface comes up where we just click on the canned statements that we want. Because we want to get that warning out as soon as possible. We don't have time to say, all right, storm is located here, moving southeast 50 miles an hour, it's going to affect all these cities. That would take minutes for us to type. So we have smarts into our technology where there are templates, so we can just quickly select what wording we want in our warning, hit transmit, warning goes out as soon as possible. And when we're talking about tornadoes, minutes or seconds can actually matter. So we need our technology to help us out as much as possible to save time. At every talk I do, I always highlight this point: redundancy. That means having multiple ways to receive warnings. Don't just have or rely on one way, because what happens if that one way fails? you don't have a backup and you may not learn that that warning has been issued. So have multiple ways to receive warnings and other information that relates to hazardous weather. We've got a NOAA weather radio there on the right-hand side. How many people own a NOAA weather radio? Hey, that's a high percentage. That's great to see. It's still a relatively cheap investment, and it's one of those that can save your life. If you're asleep, it's 2 a.m. and a tornado warning is issued, how are you going to know? What's going to wake you up? NOAA weather radio is still one of those few ways that will wake you up in the middle of the night by that loud, obnoxious alarm that it likes to do. But that obnoxious sound, it's to save your life. That's what it's all about. Wireless emergency alerts, WEAs, those have really gained traction over the last several years. Tornado warnings will cause WEAs to activate onto your phone. If you're in or very close to that polygon, or at least a tower, a cell phone tower in that polygon, your phone should go off if a tornado warning is issued. Or certain other warnings, a severe thunderstorm warning with a destructive tag. That's like the highest level of severe thunderstorm warnings, where the hail could be baseballs or bigger, or the winds could be 80 miles an hour or bigger. Okay, most severe thunderstorm warnings will not, but the highest tag of the warning will. And a higher level flash flood warnings would as well, in addition to snow squall warnings. Those would cause your phones to go off. And staying tuned to your latest local TV or radio station, I think, can be very important as well. And Weather Service does not maintain sirens, okay? We're not responsible for sirens. That's the local officials, the local jurisdictions maintain the sirens. But certainly, sirens is one way where you can receive information when a tornado warning may be issued or a tornado warning may be threatening you. But keep in mind, these sirens were never intended to be heard indoors. These are outdoor warning sirens, okay? So don't depend on hearing a siren. Even if your local area has sirens, don't depend on hearing that inside. That was never the intent. Have multiple ways to receive warnings, especially for the inside. Weather.gov, the Weather Service website. This happens to be Wilmington's website, weather.gov/ILN, but all the offices have websites for their local areas as well. If you go to weather.gov, click on your area, you'll be taken to their local website. Great way to stay situationally aware. There's some other really good information on there too, in addition to just getting the latest forecast. So this kind of gets a little bit into Skywarn and spotter training here. Where do we get our storm reports? You can go ahead and click a couple more times probably. I already mentioned that the ground truth is an essential component of the warning process. I've got like 7 or 8 things flying on here. We take information, we need information from a lot of these folks. And amateur radio, Skywarn operators, spotters, they're absolutely, definitely part of the process of giving us ground truth, letting us know what's actually happening outside, and we can put that information in our warnings. So certainly thank you to our amateur radio networks here in Wilmington, but thank you to all the amateur radio networks across the country, because I feel like I'm kind of representing all the Weather Service today. Such a huge contribution, especially during these high-end severe weather events. Here's how we're structured in Wilmington. We've got the Wilmington Net there in Clinton County in that red color right there. We're typically, when we activate, the last couple of years, not standing obviously, we'll have somebody come into the office and maintain that network, and that person's communicating with the other nets there. We've got Dayton up there and in the upper left, and then Columbus in the upper right there, the yellow color. And down there in the bottom left, we have the Cincinnati group as well. And we've got West Union in the southeast part of our area. And I think I have another map up here. If you click that out. There it is, and there we go with some frequencies and all that. So Wilmington in the middle, we got Dayton, we got Columbus, we got Cincinnati, and we got West Union, covering all of our 52 counties in 3 states. So a few pictures here of stations, maybe past, maybe present, who knows, maybe future. There's Paul there at Wilmington there, working hard during a severe weather event. This was obviously pre-COVID. And then Dayton Skywarn sent me a couple. This is actually from several years ago. This was in 2014 when Cedarville had a tornado. I believe it was an EF3 tornado. Look at their screen. If you go back, Al, just a moment. Look at their screens up there. You can see the tornado that they're actually watching. One of the TV stations, I guess, was broadcasting it as they're operating the network and certainly funneling information in to the National Weather Service in Wilmington. Go ahead there. A more modern view of Dayton Skywarn there. And then our Columbus group there. They've got a new place there. And then the Cincinnati net there with their setup. And finally West Union there with all the equipment in place to communicate the information back to us in Wilmington. So here's the process, and probably need a couple of clicks here. So our nets are talking to people in all the different counties that they serve, and they're getting reports of large hail and trees down and things that we want to know about, and that gets fed back into that red shading, Wilmington net, Wilmington Skywarn. All the information from the subnets and the counties gets back to Wilmington, and then we can get the warnings out, or the statements that put in that information that was relayed to us by spotters and those working the amateur radio networks. And this slide is not an exaggeration. We like to have this slide in our spotter training classes too. It's a team approach. It's a partnership of a lot of people working together to save lives. It's the Weather Service, it's spotters, it's amateur radio, it's emergency management partners, it's law enforcement, it's the media, the TV meteorologists. We're all trying to work together to save lives, to get everybody to know when hazardous weather is expected or severe weather is actually occurring. So, this is for Wilmington, but I think it's pretty much universal across all the areas of the country, all the weather forecast offices. There's certain things we're looking for when we want to report. We want to know where you're located, what's your location, be as specific as possible. And when that severe event happened, maybe it's happening now, that hail has fallen. Maybe it happened 20 minutes ago when you drove by and you saw that big tree down, but it was unsafe to call us at that time. You had to wait until you got home. So we want to know where you are, the time of the event, and the event itself, right? So go ahead, Al. Typically, here's what we want reported to us if you're a trained spotter. Everything in the white color there. Tornadoes and funnel clouds and wall clouds and rotating wall clouds. Hail, for us, at least a half of an inch. Now, severe hail is an inch, but a half of an inch is very useful to us because it kind of helps us calibrate what we're seeing on the radar. Any damage from thunderstorms, like trees being knocked down, trees being uprooted, large limbs being blown down from strong gusty winds, certainly flood-related issues. We had some reports of flooding this morning. High water on roads being closed. That happened just this morning, and certainly we want to know about that and any other flood-related issues. Usually we don't want to hear about lightning, though. Okay, lightning happens in every thunderstorm. You'd be calling all the time if you needed to report lightning. So don't want to hear lightning unless there's unfortunately a fatality. We got to document that. We would not want to know about lightning in a fatality situation. Otherwise, wouldn't want to know about lightning. And of course, the different hail sizes there from quarters, which is kind of the lowest level for severe, 1 inch in diameter, and then all the way up to baseballs and teacups. And it was just a couple of weeks ago, we did have tennis ball size hail, not here, but over in Fairfield County, southwest of Lancaster, in kind of east central Ohio there. They had 2.5 inch diameter hail, which caused a lot of damage. Siding was pretty much just damaged over quite a few homes there. Wind, gosh, if people have equipment that can actually give us a measurement, that would be great, but Most of the time, people don't have equipment, they don't have anemometers. So what we need is the damage. You know, it's very difficult to estimate wind, 30, 40, 50, I don't know, it was blowing pretty hard. Damage tells us what we need to know because severe wind correlates to damage, okay? Severe wind, 58 miles an hour or greater. There's been a lot of studies done. Typically, that'll cause the damage that we see with severe thunderstorms. So that's what we want to know. Trees knocked down, trees uprooted, large limbs or branches being blown down. That's the stuff typically we want to hear from spotters about. And you know, there's a lot of ways to report to us. And we love to see the pictures. You know, share them on social media and that sort of stuff. But really, in an active live weather situation, time matters. So those top two ways with the stars next to them, calling us or relaying through amateur radio, those are the best ways to get those reports to us as soon as possible. So we can put that information in warnings. Or if we don't have a warning out, get that warning out right away. Otherwise, it may be 5-10 minutes or more before we see it appear on Facebook or Twitter or that email that was sent to us. And coming down to the end of the slides, Weather Ready Nation. The National Weather Service wants to build a Weather Ready Nation, one that is better prepared for hazardous weather. I mean, there's been a lot of high-impact weather events just in the last few years, right? Around here with tornadoes and flooding. Across the country with tornadoes and flooding and winter storms. How about the tropics, hurricanes, right? Irma and Michael, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So, you know, this initiative is to try to build this weather-ready nation where everybody is more prepared for weather and can be more resilient in the face of increasing vulnerability. And you can go ahead to the next slide there. And one way to do that is to become an ambassador. Now, individuals can't necessarily become ambassadors, but groups and organizations can become ambassadors. So if you are part of or run a Skywarn group or an amateur radio group or a business or are associated with a school, you know, any of those entities can become Weather Ready Nation ambassadors. And down there at the bottom there, if you go to a website, and if you can't write that down, just do an internet search, Weather Ready Nation ambassador, and you could register, be an ambassador. It only takes a few minutes, and then you or your group or organization can be on a list and get weather safety information and some other stuff too. It's all about us working together to try to save lives. So that's the end of the formal presentation there. Again, that's our office from Wilmington. I think that might have been taken from the radar tower. Last slide and one more click there. We hope we never see that, but we know the reality, including this area. It can happen, it does happen, and it probably will happen again. So let's all try and be better prepared for when that next strong, destructive tornado happens. So that's the slides, and Al and I will entertain any questions or comments that you have for us. And you're probably going to have to talk loud because we got a little hum back here.
Okay. When monitoring NOAA weather, sometimes when seems like there's severe weather, the announcer will say, we're not asking for reports at this particular time, or within an instance or two, we are asking for reports. Is that the only way to know whether or not you're asking for reports? Do you have a website also?
Well, there's multiple ways. One, I would say if you're a trained spotter, whether we have a warning out or not, or something playing on NOAA weather radio or not, if you see something reportable, you know, the large hail, the trees coming down or whatever, call your local weather forecast office and report that. We want to know about it. I mean, certainly at the end of a lot of warnings, we'll say if you receive or have reports, please contact your local office. Some might even have the phone number listed down there as well. I mean, that would be kind of a cue. But if you see anything, even in the absence of a warning, we want to know about it because we may need to get that warning out, which could be important for somebody, you know, to your east, downstream. And offices are active, excuse me, on social media. Sometimes we'll kind of put that call on social media too. If you have anything to report, please let us know.
We'll put the call out there ahead of time. Oh, thanks. We'll put the call out there, but I know like in the warning seat, we calibrate the radar based on your reports. So if you give me a report even of a half-inch hail, that helps me to interrogate that storm and further storms that evening in that environment. So we just can't say enough how important the reports are. I like to say, if you see something, say something. You know, just let us know.
One other unrelated question. When the balloon pops, got to fall somewhere. First of all, worried about an airplane or, God forbid, it's someone in the head.
It's a good question. So we release the balloon twice a day, like Brandon said, this time of year, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And we have collaborated or coordinated with the local airport. We'll call them, hey, is it okay to release? At times, if they have aircraft coming in or going out, they'll say, hey, give us 10 minutes, and then they give us the green light. With that, we have a parachute apparatus that's attached to, we call it the train. It's about 100 to 120 feet of string to the actual instrument, but we have a parachute, so it comes back pretty gracefully back to the surface.
When it does, do you track where it is?
For a period, yes, we do.
Do you anticipate the radio images coming back to the facility post-COVID?
Yes, we do, and guess what? Today is the day. We finally got the green light from headquarters, so.
The second part of that then is, does National NOAA support amateur radio? Because
Absolutely.
In the St. Louis office, they have removed their radio, and they told us not to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, amateur radio operators and Skywarn groups, you know, they work with us. Certainly different offices may have some different restrictions or something like that. And, you know, the last couple of years, we've had to work remotely or virtually.
It happened before COVID.
Did it really okay? Well, there might be other restrictions that are unique or local to an area, but certainly even if certain operators are not allowed in the office, you can still relay your reports.
Result of that, Skywarn has disappeared in St. Louis.
Okay. Well, you may want to work with your local warning coordination meteorologist to see what options are available.
I can speak for what I know, and I know our office, and we've been waiting for this day to open the door back up. Not that we haven't had communication back and forth, but it's so much better when we're together. So, no, that's, sorry that that situation has occurred, but I can only speak about what I know. Oh, yes.
Related question, I know our, not technical terminology. Is this initiated here by NOAA or National Weather Service, or was it initiated by a radio club? What's our connection?
Yeah, decades ago, there was a history, I believe, was it Texas where it started? I believe it started in Texas, among others. And I've been at Wilmington since '94, and from day one, we had a presence. So.
Over here? Well, you know, our Doppler radar is located in Wilmington, and it can see pretty far. But here's the thing you have to keep in mind. The further away you get from the radar, the less good it sees storms. Because remember that radar beam, it's tilted upward. So we can see storms really well 20 to 30 miles away. Like the lowest level, we get a really good view of storms 20, 30 miles away. But once you get 80, 100 miles away, you're not really looking at the lowest part of the storm. You're shooting up into the mid part of the storm. You still have a sense of its structure, but we're just not seeing storms very well. And one of the beauties too is our radar kind of overlays on other weather forecast offices' radar. So once you get to the edge of the range of where we really see well, another radar is kind of overlapping in that area too. So we're not always using our radar to look at storms. We might be using a radar down in Louisville, Kentucky, to look at some of the storms down there in northern Kentucky, because we have that overlap, or maybe their radar has a better view, at least in that particular situation. Well, I think the best approach, we're out of the Wilmington office, so we can only speak what we do at Wilmington. I think the best approach... I think the best approach is to talk, at least at first, to talk to the local office and see what information you can get out of the local office. I believe there's some local offices can do things a little differently. There's some discretion or some differences between one office to the next. And what works well at one office may not work well at another office, so I think that local discretion is important. But we can't really speak for what occurs at other offices. I think reaching out to a point of contact like the warning coordination meteorologist at that office is the best approach, and that person can help you out some more, whether at the local level or if they need to direct you to someone else or another group to talk to. At our local office, and again, this is only Wilmington, this is just based on what's going on at our office and some of the considerations there, we would be allowed to have our partners return in the office. That availability would be there, such as running the Skywarn network. But this is going to differ across the country because, the restrictions in place for the last 2 years have been a function of COVID, and the cases are different from one place to another, and the considerations are different from one office to another. So that's just something that's unique to Wilmington. I can't speak for the other offices, whether they're allowed to have partners in the office or whether they're still not allowed to have others in the office. Check with your local office if there's any question about that.
Are any of your staff have radio operators?
Couldn't hear.
Are any of your staff have operators?
Yes, we have had staff members be ham operators, and in fact, our meteorologist in charge, the head of the office, is a ham.
Do you get reports from Cocoros?
Couldn't hear that.
Do you get reports from Cocoros observation desks?
Absolutely, Cocoros, very important, and we do get reports. We're looking at those daily in some cases. So Cocoros is another network the National Weather Service definitely uses.
We get the reports every day, every morning, but then if we have an ongoing event, we'll get that email that'll pop up. Brandon was showing that Awips workstation. We'll get a banner, Cocoros report, so we'll get it as soon as it's entered in the system. Cocoros, it's a cooperative, basically volunteer network that give weather reports every day for rainfall, snow amounts, things like that, but they can report all types of weather through a web base. It's very nice, very nice. It helps us quite a bit in calibrating. You were talking about radar. Our radar typically will go out 124 nautical miles, but we can see out to 248. But we also have a radar, besides Brandon had mentioned Louisville, Indianapolis, Cleveland, North Webster, Pittsburgh. We are unique We have 3 terminal Doppler radars, one in the Cincinnati area, one in Dayton, and one in Columbus. Those radars give us information every minute. So we're looking at every minute getting information from those 3 radars, and then our radar, depending on the scanning strategy, because we're looking at 3D, we're not just looking at the 0.5, we want to look aloft, because that's where the large hail comes from. That's where the tornadoes develop, the mid-level circulations. But about every 3.5 minutes, we're getting a full suite of products. So we're busy. We're busy on the radar. So that's why it's so important to get the ground truth. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, that's a good question. The gentleman's asking about CC, or correlation coefficient. So we're constantly looking to upgrade the radar. So in the 90s, we got a Doppler radar. Well, now we have a dual pole radar. And the dual pole, what that means, the radar shoots out a beam of energy on this plane, but also on this plane, so vertical and horizontal. And then it compares the vertical and the horizontal. And what we're looking at, let's say if it's uniform drops, it's raining and it's pretty uniform, the drops. So the correlation coefficient is going to be 0.9 or above. A perfect match would be 1. But if we're starting to look at something else, and if we're starting to look at like debris from a tornado, it's probably going to be less than 0.8, because there's different let's just say different returns in there. It might be like Brandon had mentioned, insulation or grass or corn or who knows what, pieces of roof. So you've probably heard the tornado, a TDS, tornado signature, and one of the things is a drop. So we're looking for the debris ball that Brandon showed. We're looking for the circulation. We're also looking for a drop in CC, or correlation coefficient. Okay, you're looking for that threshold, and we typically say that threshold is 0.8. You would look on your color scale, and when you see, okay, I've got 0.8, then you'd go up in elevation, so you'd go up 0.5, 1.5, and you'd see how much that debris is being lifted. So typically, if it was rain, it could be, 0.92. So you'd see things would be pretty uniform. Now, with science, it's not that easy all the time. It's not, we look for the silver bullet, right? It's not just CC, because CC can also indicate hail versus rain. So you got to be careful. It's one piece of the puzzle. So you're looking for the circulation, you're looking for the hook, you're looking for the debris ball, which Brandon was showing, that was that higher reflectivity in the little hook area. And then you're looking for the CC, and you're looking for some kind of vertical extent. And studies have, been put together based on how high this debris is being lofted, and kind of estimate about how strong the tornado potentially is. Correlated with the velocity products. In the old days, it used to be 5 minutes. We would have severe weather mode we'd go all the way up, and we'd call that a volume scan. But now we have, for years, we've been adjusting, tweaking the algorithms, and we can actually go halfway up and then come back down and do the 0.5. We can do that several different times, We call that like sales, like going quicker, sales. We, generally speaking, we can get the products, a whole suite of products every 3.5 minutes. It's a little bit shorter than that. I think it's like maybe 3:35. And then depending on how the sales that we set is how often we'll get the 0.5. So that kind of, it depends. But we're getting a lot of data. It's like playing a computer game and you're inundated with all this and you're trying to keep it set so a lot in your head and figure things out. Spotter reports are so important. We quite often, I think Brandon showed, we break the radar up geographically. You grab these storms, I'll grab these. It's a lot to look at. When you think about that, 4 radars, data coming in every minute on 3 of the radars, brand new data. The 4th data, the whole suite of products coming in every 3:35. And you're looking at this for many hours, and you're getting reports, you're trying to integrate this, you're putting warnings out, you're updating the warnings. It's a lot. It's a lot. That's a good question. Yeah, we have a lot of algorithms that will alert us. So we do have those algorithms. Typically, you don't want to wait until the algorithm is kicked off. You want to get the warning out before the algorithm. The algorithms have improved, but there's nothing better than a veteran radar operator working there for lead time. Yes, that's why there's always multiple sets of eyes. We have, usually in a big event, we'll say 2 radar operators, but then there'll be a coordinator that's overseeing the big picture. Sometimes we have 3 sets of radar operators because just that, we don't want to miss anything. That's a good question. Thanks. Any other questions? We have access to it. One of the apps, there's different apps out there, Radar Scope, you can get it through Radar Scope. GR2, Brandon, GR2 has, I think, access also. And Radar Scope, those are a couple. Any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, certainly, as the Weather Service, we can't endorse any one private app or company or anything like that, but there's certainly a lot of available resources out there for you to get that information. And we really appreciate your time. Great questions, great audience. Be weather safe.